I was on mute there. Sorry about that, guys. Welcome to Curzon Living Room, a season of live Q&A events on Curzon Home Cinema, and tonight, especially, also live on the big screen at Curzon Soho and Bloomsbury. So hello, everyone there. My name is Hanna Flint. I'm a film and TV critic based in London, and today I'm in conversation about Sweat with Director Magnus von Horn, and also joining us to discuss their personal reaction to the themes of the film are Lauren Clark, a journalist and writer for Women's Health magazine. We have Sana, who has vlogs about books, travel, food, and more. Plus, we have Anoni, who's a podcaster, influencer, and comedian who previously worked in the fitness industry. If you're watching us live, we're taking your questions via comments on YouTube and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @Curzon Cinemas. Please use the hashtag #SweatFilm, and we'll read out as many as possible later. But I've got some questions first, and we'll get into that right away. So, Magnus, what drew you to this particular social media story, especially one concerning a fitness influencer?
Well, thanks for having me here to talk about Sweat, first of all. Well, for me, it started in 2015. I just made my first feature film. And Sweat is quite much a reaction to that film. My first film was very kind of static, slow, very little dialogue and bleak colors. And I wanted to make something loud with a lot of colors, dynamic, to challenge myself, a kind of a completely different camera work and a different way of working on the film and with actors. And at that time, I was spending a lot of time on Snapchat. And it was the first time I started following an influencer. They were not even called influencers at the time. It was a fitness motivator. And she was not like the top. She was like up and coming, but she was posting, I think maybe 70 clips a day or something. And it just created this really, to me, it was like an extension of the reality show. And I was invited to a very kind of intimate world, uncensored in a way. There was no strategy behind it. It was like the good and the bad, washing dishes, brushing teeth, working out, crying over something, walking the dog, working out again. And all that created an interesting kind of narrative, I felt. It was kind of fresh. And I think I was quite judgmental in the beginning and cynical. And I called her narcissistic. But when I kind of got over that, I tried to embrace it and see, why am I reacting in such a kind of a bit negative way? And I realized I had some kind of jealousy towards her ability to such a spontaneous way share her life, which is something I'm completely unable to do. And I was wondering, maybe who is more narcissistic really? Like me, I have to think a day or 2 days about making a post, such a self-awareness, while she is so spontaneous about it. And that kind of jealousy drove me into wanting to write a story, also to realize where I meet with her. When we're so kind of different on the outside, I believe we're all the same somewhere on the inside. And where do I connect with her? And that was a big challenge. It was like taking a person I felt was as far away from me as possible and ending up finding where do we connect? And in that sense, I think I did, with my first film as well, the main character was a murderer, someone who had committed murder, a young teenager. And I think it's about the same kind of chase or hunt or digging, where do we connect?
So I think it relies so much on a special performance from Magdalena Kolesnik. So where did you find her? And I suppose, how method did you have to go to bring the kind of realness, the reality, the visceral reality to life?
Well, it's funny. I mean, she was I saw her in theater first, and she was the first person I invited for casting. And I think my stomach felt she was good right away, but I still went on casting for 5 months, I think, looking at other actresses, and I kept inviting her to come back. But it was not like her. It was about something, on a very universal level. She didn't even have Instagram at the time. And she was not she was into yoga, but she wasn't like a fitness. She didn't have all these things except for a kind of a charisma or something I felt would really connect with, also working with a kind of a stereotype in the beginning of a blonde girl. And she said something that I liked, that was, when people treat her as a blonde or stupid blonde, she gives them stupid blonde times 2. And I like that. And I think, okay, we can work with that. But then it was also a lot about a kind of a way of working with the film and discovering it together, and not working with a finished script from the beginning, and not telling Magda, this is your character, this is what you're going to act. But we were preparing for a year and a half. She was at the gym, she was learning to post in a credible way and building her character. And during that 1.5 years, we also changed the script a lot, and we found out what it was about together. And it's a very kind of engaging process where you're kind of open to cooperating together and using each other's creativity to shape the story, and not, at least from my side, not to pretend I know what it's about in the beginning when I really don't. It's a journey, and we find out on the way.
I'll bring you in, Anoni, because did you think the film captured a lot of the ups and downs similar to your experience when you were kind of in the fitness industry?
Do you know what's so interesting, Magnus, saying that it was around 2015 that you started to like get an insight? Because that's when I first started, and that was when I was originally a fitness influencer. And you're right, that kind of off-the-cuff posting that Sylwia does really reminded me of back then, because you wouldn't see an influencer doing that now. Everything would be pre-recorded, downloaded, cut and edited. I don't know anyone that just walks along and taps and posts. And that kind of like, yeah, like you said, that freedom. Even I as someone that does put a bit of my life online, I don't have that much freedom. I definitely can relate to like the parts of it. I think one of the things that's so interesting that I haven't really seen before on screen is when she's talking to someone and she's off to buy a present for her mum, and one of her followers like really wants to tell her about her life. And it gave me a bit of like a throwback, because I think especially with fitness, because people get so attached to you because it really feels like you're changing their lives. Like people have such big goals that they want to make, and fitness is kind of integrated in every kind of person. They do get quite attached to you. And I remember years ago, I would get a lot of people and I used to message them back, and it took me years to realize that I'm not a therapist. I shouldn't be in these really in-depth conversations with these people that I do not know, giving out advice about things that I'm not qualified to talk about. And that side of Instagram, as someone who's on the back end of it, is interesting to watch play out, because I don't know that I've ever seen that kind of recognized, like just how much those parasocial relationships, when you come into reality, they're really huge. Like people are really, really invested in you and really trust in you. And that part of it, I definitely really related to watching that back. It kind of made me feel a bit like, oh my God, I remember that.
Lauren, I think there's a really uneasy balance where Sylwia is saying both love your body, but also your body can be better if you just do what I do. And I suppose as someone who, you know, working for women bags, how well do you think the film captures that conflict between body positivity, but still are quite unrealistic beauty standards for women to kind of live up to, especially in 2021?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think, you know, there's a cult of self-improvement. And even though there is this whole body acceptance and, you know, move towards body diversity in fitness, you know, that, and it's something that, you know, brands are really jumping on at the moment. There is still this kind of, you know, very slim body ideal, like she looks like the perfect fitness influencer that, you know, like what you imagine fitness influencers look like. And when in the first scene where, you know, she's like, everyone, like, love your body, like, accept your body, you can do this, like, it's all about kind of how you feel and holistic side of fitness. You then go to the kind of scene where she's talking to her old school friend who says, oh my God, I really want your bum. Like, you know, it's very kind of this objectification of fitness as well. And the way in which, yeah, it's kind of things happen, the conversation might have moved on, but in reality, you know, things are still where they were, you know, 10, 15 years ago in terms of fitness.
Sana, what did you make of how the film presented the public and private personas of Sylwia? And she, you know, we mentioned the cult-like world she's become a leader in, where she appears to get more validation from her followers than the people she knows in real life. What did you make of that?
So I was quite surprised when I was watching it about how isolated she was. So for me, my experience and being on social media for the last 12 years, I've made almost all of my friends via being on YouTube, being on Instagram. And when you go to events, the most fun bit is seeing all your friends there. And for her, it seemed like the total opposite, you know, a quick hello and then head off. And also I think her personality in private versus on camera was so different. And there is always a sort of, you know, you have to be a bit more on when you're on camera, but I found that difference really, really striking. But yeah, definitely the isolation versus the really personal way that she did talk to her followers and saying my loves and things like that, which I think that's quite an intense way of talking to your followers. So that I found that very striking.
Magnus, I think the stalker plotline is rather disturbing, but was it a way to show how often women feel obliged to perform this emotional labor for other people, especially men who kind of demand their attention in quite toxic ways?
Not for me. I mean, when I thought about it, it was more like a shadow figure or a flip side of Sylwia, kind of like her dirty twin. In a way, also something. I mean, someone who feels that, like, I think she's very scared of having a connection with him, and I think her fear is based that maybe he feels what she feels, and they share that. And accepting that is too scary for her because that means they're sharing something. And I thought of it more as a way of her to maybe confront herself when she, I don't know, I don't want to maybe spoil, but when she gets to a very bad point with the stalker, it's a kind of a mirror moment for her. And I wanted her to come to a mirror moment. I mean, not the phone mirror, but like a kind of a brutal, honest mirror, which would allow her to open up for the end part of the film. It's like seeing the shitty side of yourself, or the lied about. It reminds her maybe that she's lying to herself.
So, I mean, I think everyone watching this will hopefully have seen it, especially people who are watching it at the Curzon in Bloomsbury. But let me get in some of the ladies on this as well, because I think maybe the fact that after she goes to the hospital with him helps him, and it's this random stranger. So I suppose this is again, a stranger, a follower that she doesn't know. Obviously, she feels a bit guilty. But Noni, what did you make of that? How did it make you feel seeing her help this man who has obviously done something quite toxic in the past, but she's kind of been behind him getting hurt, but then she still feels the need to help him out in the end?
I mean, I have to say, Hannah, what you said, I kind of is what I felt, because I personally use all the time where, like, I'll find myself getting this really weird desire to help people that I've no need to be helping. And I do think that's some kind of like gendered aspect of my personality. I found it really stressful to watch, to be honest, because I feel like, especially what can be scary if you are someone with like a big platform, is you're put in such a vulnerable position, and then you're not really like a celebrity, so you don't necessarily have the infrastructure to protect you. So you might not have a bodyguard, you might not have the means, I don't know, someone who's like a more general celebrity might have. And so I found it terrifying more from that aspect, thinking, God, she really is out there on her own, a bit like what you're talking about with the isolation. And I guess I was looking at it more from like a protection point of view, and how, like, from a cynical, scary point of social media, it's kind of like these women are put up for fodder and you do really well, but actually the world isn't looking after you. You're just kind of like a cash cow. I mean, Magnus, it sounds like I read it differently from how you were intending, but that's I guess where I was watching it. And the fact that she helped him, I mean, I can completely relate to that, because I was absolutely horrified about what happened to him. I couldn't even watch because I'm really squeamish. But yeah, there was a lot of things that I related to that, but it's interesting hearing it with that shadow element, because I guess I didn't necessarily pick up on that personally.
It's so many layers. I love it. Magnus, we've got a question actually from Chelsea Lauren, who is from a Tandon watch along party. She's asked, there are intentional repetitive noises throughout the film, for example, the blender. Can you tell us what your intention is with these sounds?
The blender, I mean, I guess, like, in a broader aspect, it was a kind of a realism or a documentary feel that we caught while rehearsing the film and kind of practicing it and shooting lots of stuff. And we were working a bit on this scene one day in Magdalena's apartment, and we were just shooting it very kind of like dirty with just a camera, and she was walking around and she was using this blender. And it did exactly the repetitive sounds it does in the film. And I felt it brings a kind of attention to what you want to hear, what you can't hear, what you want to see, but don't really see. And also, thinking about it from her point of view, since she knows this post and she wants to watch it, but she doesn't really want to watch it. So the blenders are kind of a way of, sometimes you want to watch something you don't really want to. You stand in the corner and watch from a distance, or you watch your computer screen with one eye. And this blender was a kind of a way of, I don't know, maybe not just sitting down directly and watching it for her.
No, absolutely. There's definitely a kind of sense of, I want to separate myself from those emotions and that feelings, but kind of morbid curiosity of what I've just done. No, it's really well played out. And Sanna, what did you think about the kind of generational gap between Sylwia, not just with her mother, but with the TV anchors who kind of call her out at the end? Do you think that kind of representative of how people, especially from older generations, just don't get social media or don't get this kind of feeling of wanting to be honest and vulnerable in public?
I found both the conversation with the family and on TV so interesting, because those to me felt like the most real and to me most recognizable parts. First of all, how many followers do you have now, and sort of condensing it all to the fame rather than what does it mean to the people that watch you? What does it mean to you? What sort of value can people get out of it? Sorry, what was I forgot what your question was.
No, but I suppose Amy, it was exactly that, and how, even later on where she's just got that moment where you realize she's totally on this show for reasons that she did not think she was on here for.
Yes.
That seeing that, the way they're very willing to kind of rip her to shred, or just kind of, I don't know, demean her in a way for being open.
I find it quite interesting, because there used to be a time where if you were doing things like this, you were seen as kind of like weird and geeky and people didn't know what it was. And these days it's, young kids want to be influencers. It's this thing that has status, but at the same time, people still think that it's a bad thing to be. And they still think about it very negatively, even though they now know what it is and they know that it can be a job. So I found that really recognizable. And we were chatting a bit also about her getting so vulnerable on TV, which I found really great. And then to me, watching her then go into the exercise, to me felt very positive, because that kind of felt like, okay, now I'm going to do the thing that I do best and that people love so much and that brings me joy. But I also was definitely wondering how other people would see that scene.
Absolutely. Lauren, obviously women's health gets a little name check in the film, but she, through the women's health, she's giving away a fitness DVD with a cover, which obviously we see at the birthday. But actually in one other scene, we see the actual pain and suffering she puts her body through. And that seems to be more realistic of how she maintains that body. Obviously you've got the, workout, but that's the quite nice one, the easy way. So I suppose, how important is it that women's mag and fitness media in general are actually realistic about the work that needs to be done to achieve these aspirational figures?
Yeah, no, she really was putting herself through it in that gym scene. And like Sanna just said, she was sort of punishing herself after the morning TV interview with her workout. And it's kind of, that's what she always falls back on. It's almost like that's her constant throughout all of this, even as her life has changed. She's become really famous. She's got this, she's always got exercise. And in a way, I wonder whether it's not necessarily perhaps the healthiest coping mechanism for her, because clearly other parts of her life she really hasn't got so much of a handle on, and she's really wanting that human connection with people. She feels very lonely and isolated, hasn't met the person that she wants to meet. So I think it's kind of perhaps not super healthy. But in terms of media and fitness, and I think there's a real appreciation among fitness influencers and fitness magazines and everything now, that there is a whole kind of mental health side, and it's not all about aesthetics. And I think I wouldn't say people would purely be like, oh, I just work out for aesthetics anymore. But people wouldn't necessarily say that, and I think that wouldn't be something that influencers would really be pushing anymore. I think the conversation definitely has moved on. I think people realize at least on the surface, mental health is very, very, very important. But in the film, I think we see how, she might be really, really, really healthy in a kind of physiological sort of way, but her mental health is suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Magnus, we've kind of mentioned this scene twice now, but the one where she meets a kind of school friend, I'm pretty sure she can't remember, but then they sit down and she's putting all this trauma on her. And then Sylwia opens up, but then the friend asks for a selfie. And I think that was such a gut punch of this moment where she's gone from laying everything down. It's like, oh, let's put a smile on. So I suppose do you think are you trying to show that there is a real dehumanization of influencers, that actually they can't see that behind it, they're just a tool for them to let off their steam, let followers like feel a way to kind of put all their stuff on them and not actually see there's a person behind it?
Again, like, no, when I work on when I prepare the film, I work on the script and on the set, I never think of the story in such broad terms as, okay, a scene about showing dehumanization of influencers. Like, I try not to keep such big concepts in my head because I don't want to be moralistic, and I didn't ever want to make a statement about social media and say this is the way it is, or it's like that, or it doesn't interest me. What interests me was if Sylwia puts so much emotion like in posts, and then she meets someone, an old friend who she doesn't remember really, and the friend assumes that she can speak in the same way to Sylwia. I just think that's interesting, that kind of, because I myself, I've been in situations, it's a bit different, but when you walk in a shopping mall or in town and you meet some old friends who takes you for a meet, I don't know, it's like a kind of emotional vampire who enters your life for a moment and then just leaves, and you're left with some trauma or luggage, or the person has opened you up and you've said something you didn't expect yourself to say, and then they just go. And I think that's, even if, I don't know, you don't even need to have a smartphone to experience that. But I think when it involves an influencer, it just becomes 10 times more interesting.
Yeah. And I suppose, I know you said earlier that you wanted to kind of do this big bright colors compared to your previous film, but I think that it still feels somewhat sterile, like this kind of, and it was that a way to have the production design kind of factor into presenting her quite the lonely world that she kind of lives in?
Well, we worked a lot with, for me it was more about opening up and trying to love locations and spaces that I would normally, like, I don't love on a personal level, but to kind of engage in a different kind of aesthetics, a shopping mall, a nail salon, her apartment, and try to, look at them, okay, because she likes them on a certain level, and that's her world. And for me, it was more interesting, like, how to get into her kind of point of view or her mindset, and to forget about my own preferences. And that was that was a challenge, and it was a very aware one, but it's really rewarding, because it's like, it's nice to forget about yourself and your own favorite color.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I want to let's go back to the ending. It's an emotional climax, and as we said previously, kind of Sylwia owns her vulnerability and gets straight into the workout. And I'd love to kind of go around the panel and come back to you, Magnus, but would you say she's ended on a healthy note, or fallen deeper into his reliance on her influencer role for gratification? So Anoni, can I go to you first?
I think it's such a good question, because it's such a specific scenario. Because on the one hand, I think she's just been really professional. She's like, oh my God, I've got to do this live workout. So I've cried and I'm going to wipe my tears away. I'm going to go ahead and do it. On the other hand, I found it to be like, aren't we all like that? I don't know if you've ever, I remember talking about this once, but 4 years ago, I think I'd had a really bad argument with my boyfriend, and then I uploaded, not the current one, a different one, and I uploaded a picture of us onto Instagram while we were arguing, which is so weird. And it's almost like you're watching her in real life live this duality, which I think, because we all have our phones as an extension of our arm, I don't think this is necessarily exclusive to Sylwia. I think all of us at points have really learned how to kind of switch modes in a way that we wouldn't have maybe been able to do before. I don't think it's the healthiest thing. I just think it's a sad situation where the only thing she really has is her audience, and she's so isolated that what else can she do but cling on to that one thing she has. So I don't think it's super healthy, but I also don't think it's that unusual in our modern world.
Lauren,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, go, Magnus.
Can I ask what picture you uploaded while fighting?
Oh no, I think we like had an argument and I was upset, and I think I posted a pic of us like on holiday from like a few weeks before with like a little cute heart or something, which is so like the psycho, shouldn't we say that, but really like, weird thing to do. And I don't know if it was because subconsciously we broke up shortly after, but I assume that what I wanted to do was prove to my audience that we were in a great relationship when actually it was bad.
But it's a great, it's a really good film scene.
Yeah.
Magnus is like storing this for the next one.
Yeah, but it's just, you know, too good to come up with if it hasn't happened.
You can have that one.
Lauren, have you ever
Thank
done
you.
that? Have you ever kind of falsely posted on social media to make people think that you're in a good place when you're not? Oh, is Lauren there? Did you hear me?
Sorry, I'm here. Well, yes, I think I have just, you know, kind of posted like a happy picture, not specifically about relationships and things like that, but I think what that last scene really epitomized to me was the kind of Instagram versus reality. And, you know, she's, you know, I think it's really interesting how she's got this perfect life. She's presenting, you know, her perfect self online. And I think, you know, Britney Spears earlier this week apologized for pretending to be perfect. And I think, you know, it really, what the film is great at showing is that no one is perfect. Like, you can't be perfect all the time. It's unhealthy to strive for that. And, you know, you should just be yourself. And I don't know whether she quite got to that point yet, but I think, you know, when she was like talking to the morning TV host and she was like, you know, I you know, she's owning the fact that she'd been herself, so I think she's getting there.
Yeah, and so I know you kind of saw it as a somewhat positive thing. Was there anything else you kind of want to say more about it as a final note?
I find it interesting that I interpreted it quite differently, and also maybe it came across to me differently because I am not someone who's posted lots of personal things online. So I do a lot of reviewing and things like that, and I don't share loads of personal stuff. So I think maybe if you do that, you do have a different point of view for it. But I felt like they totally had it out for her. She managed to show so much vulnerability, and to me it felt like at the end she was like, I stood my ground, I was emotional, I have the right to be emotional, and now I'm going to do what I'm good at, and I'm going to go do the workout. So that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, go girl. We've got a few minutes. I'm being told to wrap up, but I've got one more question from YouTube, from Olivia from Magnus. How did you approach directing the scenes where Sylwia is quite lonely? Olivia noticed the camera followed her in such a way that we experienced everything with her.
Well, it was somehow the way we worked on the film while preparing it. We would do lots of rehearsals where we didn't know, we didn't want to like set out with set storyboards, or we didn't want to know exactly how the scene was going to look like. We wanted good situations, and then we worked for a long time to build intuition, like intuition with Magda as an actress, intuition for the cinematographer, and me. I felt like as soon as I like went in and directed details, or like stand here at that, it's like I start ruining things, destroying things, and so I mean we became very good after long pre-production in knowing or putting Sylwia in a scene, and I knew that Magda would know what to do, and the cinematographer Michał would know where to look, and I could just sit back and not direct. And it's a kind of a dream position of a director, I think, on a film set, when you have such a strong team surrounding you and they know better their station than I do. So I think it's the result of a very long pre-production that ends up with a kind of intuition where she knows what to do when she's alone in her apartment, and not like without instrumentally kind of showing I'm lonely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to all of our guests tonight. Magnus von Horn, thank you for the movie. Lauren Clark, Sana, and Unoni. Swear is out now at cinemas nationwide and available to screen at Curzon Home Cinema. If you enjoyed this film and this event, tell all your friends and come back for more. You can follow Curzon Cinemas on Twitter and Facebook for all the latest updates. I've been Hanna Flint.